know. That's a
That's the question.
That's the question.
It seems to take its time at the moment. We had this last time.
We did have this last time.
No, we are live.
Hi, we are live.
It jumped on quickly. Didn't have to think about it today.
No, hallelujah. Yeah, and Substack is going through changes, although I hear it's changing all the time, but yeah.
Isn't that what all media does? It changes all the time. You're like, okay, I'll just try and keep up as best I can.
Exactly. So here we are, Art and Heart of Menopause.
Yes, we are here. We've got an interesting topic today, haven't we, Chitra?
We do. We have one that's not talked about. I mean, if perimenopause and menopause isn't talked about as much as we'd like, postmenopause is not talked about at all, other than thank God it's done, that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But kind of what it means. And I think there is a lot of conversation about older women and, you know, the sort of emergence of, you know, a term I hate, which is aging gracefully, because I don't want to age gracefully at all, you know. But I think there's so much wisdom in Ayurveda and in the Chinese tradition. I wouldn't even say the medicine tradition, I'd say the Taoist tradition, that we can really talk about.
In the Chinese tradition. Oh, there we go. So sorry.
Ooh, there was two
that
of
was
me.
That was me, my bad. Yes, so much wisdom in it. And yeah, you're speaking about the Taoist tradition. Ayurveda, you know, I'm also talking about, I'm talking about still the very same Ayurvedic tradition. But Ayurveda encompasses and takes from 6 different philosophies within the Indian philosophical perspective. And so, and that includes Buddhism too, you know, so there's that connection. But yeah, I mean, there are lots of ways to talk about it, lots of directions that we can go. But before we do that, how about we introduce ourselves? What do you say?
Yes. I think that was just going to think crossing my mind too, Chitra. I'll go.
I think we've this is maybe either our 14th or our 15th live.
Wow.
Yes. Well, one of them you were not at, and
That's
and
right.
there was one week where we missed altogether. But we kind of have been doing this for a while, so it's not surprising that we're beginning to finish each other's sentences.
Yes. Well, I can go. Well, I'm Clarissa Christensen. I am the writer of Heart of Menopause here on Substack. I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner. I specialize in Qigong and also Chinese nutritional therapy. And I've been working with women in perimenopause, menopause, and beyond for well over a decade, dedicated to that. And I'm super excited for today's talk because I'm 65, so I think I know what it feels like to be postmenopause.
Yeah. And my name is Chitra, and I write Art of Menopausing here on Substack. And I'm a doctor of Ayurveda, and I have been specializing in women's health for quite a while, but not focused in specifically on perimenopause or postmenopause for as long as you have. I think I've been, gosh, I just redid my insurance, and then we were talking about the age of the roof that I installed, and they said, "Oh, it's been 6 years," and no. So it's kind of that sort of thing with perimenopause and menopause, but it's it's close to a decade now, I guess, if my roof is 6 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, my goodness. So, so yes, I am a practitioner, a doctor of Ayurveda. I do energy medicine, yoga, meditation, all of the things, and have been in some form of an energy medicine practice or a body-based practice for several decades. Yeah. And I too am excited about this topic because, yeah, I am 64 and well past menopause. But, here's the thing about those of us that are in this field. We're in this field of growing and aging, and being embodied. And so I find that the older I get, the less I know. And so, so even talking about this topic sort of is, I'm sure that a 70-year-old woman would know far more than
Yeah.
I, and an 80-year-old woman, and beyond. I mean, I know the physiological issues that occur, but certainly not the mindsets,
No.
because aging and the change, whatever that looks like for you, is different for every woman and at every age, because you see lots of different social structures that either erode or come to life that were never available before. Different support systems, again, that erode or come to being, that were never there before. So, yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
It is. And I think, I'm 65, so heaven only knows what it's going to look like if I'm 75, if I live beyond that. And I can only look to being from a family of women, with the exception actually of my own mother, who have lived phenomenally long time. It's not unusual in my family for people to be 90. And my grandmother was 100, and I had another relative they were 103 for both of these women when they passed away. And I
Wow.
have seen them in their 80s and 90s, and they might have been frailer in body, but the spirit was, strong. And I have great memories of being a very small child. We used to go to, she was my grandfather's cousin, my father's godmother. She was,
Yeah.
you didn't cross Dr. Ursula. She was a scary creature, and she pulled on pants. Women in the 1960s who were nearly 90 didn't wear pants, and she put on her shoes, and she's like, "Right, we're off out now." And she said, hurry up, you lot. She said, and she's up the hill faster than the rest of us. So I have these great kind of role models that say to me that the spirit becomes stronger, that we are evolving into something so different as we age. And I saw those women sort of when they were 70, 80, 90. And obviously, when they were 100, there was obviously a very different scenario. And they were inward by that stage. But they were
Mm.
still going for quite a few more years. Like the spirit was not ready to depart this world.
And that's the thing that we have to remember. But we're really talking about, the only thing I can speak from and about is from my experience
Mm,
around
mm,
this. And my I don't have much ancestry to fall back on to understand what they would look like. And the ancestry that I do, they lived very dramatic lives, meaning they were in the middle of war zones when they were young. And,
mm.
and they, war zone is putting it very lightly.
Yeah,
And they were
yeah.
deeply affected by the
Mm,
environment, and they were very much in survival mode without much support. So I suspect that changed their longevity. But still, they lived well, close to being 80 years old from those that I know of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's more about, like we're talking about living longer well. And I think that's the concept. Even though I have had people who've lived a long time that I know, it's really, as practitioners, we want people to have a quality of life that
Yes.
is so much higher than it is for many people. We may well be able to age well, but a lot of people are carrying multiple comorbidities, and life, the quality of life, isn't quite matching the length of life.
Yes. Yes. And that is, I think that's one of the most challenging things in our society. The reason why your ancestors were able to go up the hill faster than the younger generation was because they were moving and walking all the time, right? They everything they did was manual, unless they had someone else doing it for them, unless they had a larger family, but still everything was manual. They weren't sitting down all the time. They were, whether it was going to get water from either a well, which may have been for outside of the house or beyond the house, or going to the bathroom, which is not right off of the bedroom. Or
True.
going up and down stairs, so and in the Asian traditions, the seating is not on chairs, it is on the floor. So you're constantly going up and down, which means that your core is constantly being activated.
Yeah.
Whereas we have to remind ourselves to do something for the core all the time. And
Yeah.
even natural walking, and I don't know if you've seen this, this is day 10 for me, but I decided that I was just going to get up at dawn or earlier. I'm usually up, but out,
Mm.
um, because it started getting cool enough and late enough here so that I could do it. And so I am walking 10 times around the block now. Every
Fantastic.
day I did a little bit more. But let me tell you, I thought that I was somewhat active. Not There's always this imposter syndrome that I'm telling people to do things where I'm not doing them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Unless I have a class or like have enrolled in something. So I'm up now in the mornings, and let me tell you, it changes your entire system.
Mm.
Just doing it. It doesn't mean that you have to go to 10,000 steps. It doesn't mean that you have to run. You could do it at a leisurely pace,
Yeah.
whatever your capacity is, and that changes your entire physiology, your gut, your everything, your emotions, how you're breathing, everything.
Mhm.
But that's general for everyone. There are specific things that are going on for
Oh,
women
yeah. For
during
women.
perimenopause and
Yeah.
beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the things we want to do is like you said, move. I mean, I've got
Yeah.
the dog, so I have to get out with the dog. So she forces me out on a 45-minute round the block pull. I mean, she pulls all the way, all the way. She's very strong. But that has kept me on track to being out and moving every day.
Yes. Yeah.
Every day. Yeah.
And a lot of single women don't have dogs. They have cats. And
They do.
cats, like me. Some have both. Some have none. Some have, but cats tend to want to sit on you and not want you to move. They're into the let's stay in bed kind of thing.
Mm.
but it's a matter of deciding that you're going to do it, and then even if you're not doing it the next day after you've decided, just keep that decision in your head
Mm.
and then move on. Sometimes it's not even, I find it hard to tell people that I'm going to do something, because for me it's not an accountability thing.
No,
Becomes a shame thing if I haven't done it. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to talk about that thing
no,
anymore. And but after
that's
I'm
not good.
I'm in the groove, it's like, okay, here we go.
That's good. That's good. I mean, you and I both, people who follow David Crow, and he says a wonderful thing. He says, Yi Dao, Qi Dao. It's a Chinese thing, and the Yi is like, the intention, but it's a bit more than that. And where Yi goes, Qi goes. So really, if we intend to do something, we get the energy to do it, then kind of it flows. And when we get walking, there's this moving thing. It's really good for us. Walking, of course, is good for us anyway, getting back into natural movement. But
um,
maybe yeah.
Yeah, natural movements. And I'm just going to get off the topic of walking in just one moment. And I
Yeah.
know that there are women who are having knee issues or hip issues, or there are things that are going on, that prevents them from walking. In which case there are some movements that can be done,
Mm.
like swimming, like where
Yes.
you're not being pulled by gravity. Both
Mm.
yoga and qigong are great, and you want something that is um, lengthening, that is a long time, so that you're breathing steadily for
Mm.
an extended period of time, so that you're moving gently for an extended period of time. And that's really where the benefits come. It doesn't come from sprinting, it comes from and I'm talking sprinting,
Yeah, yeah.
not from the running perspective. It comes from dynamically balancing, stretching out the time. And it doesn't matter how much time you do it for, it's just go to half of your capacity, as we've spoken about before in movement. And then
Yeah,
eventually your capacity will get higher and higher.
yeah. And I think Chinese medicine would say that aging often begins in our joints and that we become less mobile. And so it really encourages Qigong and Tai Chi. And then there are movements that are older than Qigong called the Dao Yin. And they're essentially sets of incredibly simple stretching movements. And they're quite gentle, but they can really help that lubrication of the joints, which moves us away from the stiffening. And therefore, what we talked about earlier and another time was the pain, because when we stiffen up, can easily get pain setting in. And then obviously, physically we stiffen up, mentally we stiffen up too.
And emotionally and
Yes,
relationship wise. Let's
yes,
go, let's go back into a little earlier conversation around this, um, and how postmenopause and aging is spoken about,
yeah,
because I've got some problems with it. I even have problems with how supposed holistic people talk about, well, supposed or not
yeah,
supposed,
yeah,
holistic people speak about it, and
mm,
the things that they call it. I
yeah.
have like some major issues with it.
Why don't, why don't you share some of those and then chime in with mine?
Okay. Okay, so when I was younger, it really has to do with um, the patriarchy partially, and it has to do with diminishing a human and expectations. that are unrealistic. So there is a term that was made famous by Dr. Jen Gunter about perimenopause and menopause is the, what is it? Adolescent, not puberty, another puberty or return to adolescence. I mean, so all of those terms, what does that do? That diminishes who we are. That makes us children again, unable, without the experience of 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years. All of a sudden we have gone back into prepubescent because our sexuality, or no, it's not even sexuality, because our reproduction, physical reproduction, is no longer top and foremost within the society. So I have a big problem with that. I even have a small problem with calling it the second spring.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I'll tell you what my issues with that are in a minute.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, do I tell her? Yes.
No. Yeah.
Second spring. Okay, I love the concept of spring. I love the concept of renewal. But truthfully, what woman would want to go back to being 16 or 20 or revert to that time? Spring is beautiful. It's new. It's renewal, but
Mm.
it's like it's really hard. That
Yeah.
change is so, if you've ever seen a slow motion video or movie of a plant growing out of a seed,
Mm-hmm.
or or flowers blossoming, or coming out of the earth, or leaves coming out of the branches, I can literally feel pain.
Mm. Mm.
So I don't, so again, it's like going backwards, where I prefer that we look at it from more of a harvesting perspective, a late summer perspective, where things
Mm.
are in bloom. There's plenty of warmth and knowledge, and all of that growing pain stuff is done. And now we can harvest the juiciness of life. And yeah, so that's my issue with that. How about you?
Well, I think firstly, with the second spring. I think it's being misinterpreted
Mm,
in the modern Western concept. First of all, it doesn't happen straight after you've gone through menopause. You're still actually in what are known as the 7 times 7 Jing cycles, 7 Jing cycles, 7 years long. So actually, there's still a period after menstruation has ended. Yeah, it's a bit weird to say that, but yeah, after you've gone through menopause, that is still about rest, reflection, and a reorientating. The second spring is probably a translation rather than an actual. In fact, it is about a sense of life moving forward. And sometimes, we go wood, fire, earth, metal, water. So those are the sort of 5 element cycles. So they can in some way restart inside yourself, but they're not the same. They're much sort of shorter, almost more annual inside the person. So we are in a starting over again, but we're also deep in the water element. And so there's this sense that we are much more like water, deeper, more powerful. There's a shift from the hugely physical outward towards the more inward, the more service. We're less individual orientated, me kind of thing, and more about less bothered about that. So I think that there's it's a difference. We're finding inner strength. I think what Chinese medicine is, and the Chinese thing is saying, we're finding something very different, and that comes from us working through the elements too. That water is about fear. We step through the fear. We step out of ego in some ways, which is big in the West. We release a lot of anger, which is in the wood. We find joy, which is the fire, and we are more grounded, more stable. And so it's kind of an interesting that there's this kind of releasing. And so we come to become on a journey to a wiser elder, rather than seeing it as some sort of re-going through the cycles as if we were in puberty. And that's not what it's about. It's much more the body to soul journey that goes on.
Yeah, and that's also reflective in how a lot of people who are in the aging community, meaning they're talking about aging and how great it can be and how you can go back to the dreams that you once had and you return to this place pre it just doesn't make sense because we're not erasing the years ever. What we are doing is we are building. What happens is we have choice.
Yes.
That's the key. We don't add any sort of expectation, that that's like when I retire, I'm going to do blah blah. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to do that. There's no such things as this ending beginning at all. It's kind of like we're trying to think of post-menopause like New Year's Eve. And New Year's Eve, what do? We make resolutions. And what
Yeah.
happens, 3 days later? Those resolutions are done because
Yeah.
there's no such thing in life as beginning and ending of seasons unless you're talking birth and death. Right? Those are the only beginnings and endings we have. The rest are cyclical evolutions through whether it's the Chinese elements or the Ayurvedic doshas and elements. And so that's what we really need to that's what I want to express is that it's the juice of life. It's the juiciness of life that we are trying to um, build. Because throughout our lives we have all these different responsibilities to others, and we kind of the juice kind of gets stolen from us. We give it away. It
Yeah.
just dries up. And yes, even though in Ayurveda we call it Vata time of life, where we start drying up, but it's really not that. It's the juiciness of
Yes.
life, whether it is body, mind, or spirit, and that's what we really need to hold on to.
I think I agree. I think a lot of it would be to say we're dropping the illusion of youth. That's coming away, and we are applying all this wisdom that we have gained and more that we will gain for ourselves, but also for the greater good. It's so different. It's not the service we had as a younger woman. There's something different about that. But we can check more change on whether that's your neighborhood, just your neighbor, or whether that's collectively. There's something that we bring to the party, and it is juicy and it is rich, really, really rich ways of living. And I think that it's not about recreating being young, which is what I often think it gets interpreted as if we're now running around and we've got new careers, and as you said, writing books and doing this and this and this. And I would say, as a Chinese medicine practitioner, after the perimenopausal symptoms subside, we may feel a lift, little sort of yang lift, and that's what I think spurts people on temporarily. But we actually need to nurture yin energy a lot because it's still lower, and we can get carried away in a sort of uplift but we are looking for being able to sustain and live well. And that's a different approach.
It is a very different approach, and it's an approach that I think that we go back to the basics of Ayurveda, of living, of Chinese medicine. We go back to the basics. And what we see on a physiological level, I mean, I've heard the words breakdown as part of, you know, and this is our problem with aging in general, right?
Yeah.
Is that it's a one-way ticket, whether it is body or mind. It's a one-way ticket downhill, and we only consider it in one dimension. You said something interesting, and I wish you could expand about that. What do you mean by the illusion of youth?
I think that, when we're young, we think we can, do it all, have it all, be it all. I think there is an illusion around that. And I also think that we sometimes we think we can in this sort of we're next new puberty, we're almost like starting again. And I think that's what I would mean. We drop some of those things and we begin to be, in a sense, a little bit more truthful with ourselves in our
Hmm.
own capacities, where we are, who we are, what we stand for. And that's what I would say, that when youth is, there's a, yeah, and I think, that we're invincible as well, whereas we understand that death is
And
there.
immortal.
Oh, yeah, young people think they're immortal. Whereas and I think it's harder in the West because our relationship with death is far more separate than it was. And we don't have an ancestor worship type culture, which is there and more in the East, that there's this connection that you are part of a continuum. And I think in a very individualized society, we're more likely to hang on to youth rather than to see, to see what death is and see it as, in a sense, there's a gift there in that learning, in the connection, in the continuity, rather than, oh my God, it's something to be feared.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I tend to agree with that, and a lot of this anti-aging and aging gracefully comes is a direct descendant, is a
Mm.
direct byproduct of that youth thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And also because of the way we speak about older people as a society, the way they're treated, they're pushed to the side, they don't have usefulness. Um, whereas in traditionally, if you were to speak to an Indigenous person, or even now today, people in these older people still come, they have their place and their valued place and their role within our society. Um, that is there, and it's just not here. We think, oh, they're a burden, they cost money, they should be somehow farmed out and then preferably disappear quietly, thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so now that we've worked through that, let's look at a little more. You want to go into physiology of what can happen, or do you want to go
What
into
is that?
emotional, spiritual work, the
I
Taoist
think it's good,
perspective?
it's good to think about what is happening, I think, in body and in mind, and what that means. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and one more thing, I just want to say this to those who are listening that are in the perimenopause and that first year of menopause to a little bit beyond. Um, the Margaret Mead had said something called the postmenopausal zest. You know, that word. So yeah, there might be some zest there, you
Mm.
know, but what we're the idea is that there's some sort of liberation that's happening, or life is better on the other side. I mean, I hear that all the time. But you know, the idea is that as we're shedding things, there are these feelings of freedom. You know, freedom from responsibilities. We
Yeah.
start to hopefully accept ourselves, you know,
Mm.
where we lose that need to um, be somebody, be whatever to other people. And sometimes that there's nothing we can do about it, but still there is some, because the structure of the life that we've built is still contains us. But
Yeah.
then that structure falls away because, I mean, if we're going to talk about death, we know that, you know, death happens and grief
Mm.
happens.
Yeah.
And as death happens, whether it's in a partner or a friend, those structures that we've built around us have fallen. So, you know, there's self acceptance, and with that comes a confidence. You know, it's like, and we don't care anymore, you know, but what we need to do is we need to have more connection within ourselves and with
Yeah.
others, and we can deepen intimacy with ourselves. And then that means that we can be deeper into more deeply intimate with others once we
Mm.
have that self intimacy. And that brings on clarity. So all of those things happen, but it's not I'm going to go out and buy it or get it or smear it
No.
on my skin or have a surgery to have it done. None of that is,
No, none of that is part of it. It just doesn't happen like that because then you're still not accepting
yeah,
the changes. And whether we like it or not, the body will be frailer. It's in Chinese lesson terms, the jing is declining. It has a finite, and when it's done, and that's part of the journey. So we become maybe less about that, but we are feeling a sense of maybe it's a sort of lifting of some of the loads that we've carried, even though we can still have to care for partners who aren't well or whatever. I think the burdens, this duality that we've talked about, where women have to do everything, that, running to stand still, some of that does eventually pass away, and we gain back some choice over how our days look.
yeah. So you spoke about the joints,
Mm-hmm.
our start of that. I speak in Ayurvedic terminology where it's Vata increases, which means dryness increases,
Mm-hmm.
less juiciness, which means the joints is one of the major places where Vata lives
Yes.
throughout life because it is movement. So yes, joints are going to be affected. Nervous system is going to be affected.
Yeah.
Um, but I think what we look at is beyond the Vata being effective, it's the gut and the microbiome and the
Mm-hmm.
rasa, which is plasma, emotions, um, lymphatic system,
Mm.
um, taste.
Yes.
Taste is big, huge. So what
Yes.
happens is we start to contract because there
Mm-hmm.
isn't a buffer, of juiciness around us. So we start to contract and we fall into these ruts and we start lacking diversity. And it could be
Mm.
lacking diversity in foods, in
Yes.
people, in thoughts,
Mhm.
and in the microbiome itself. The
Yes.
microbiome stops being diverse. And as soon as we stop being diverse, that's when other pathogens, illnesses,
Mhm.
functions
Yes,
start and communication within the body and outside of the body starts to decline.
yes. And in Chinese medicine, we would be saying that the spleen, which is the vital part, the spleen stomach, but particularly the spleen system, which is where we get and extract the qi from our food, that is an area that needs special attention as we age. Whereas we've been maybe more focused on the liver, although I think in a modern world we still need to be focused on the liver. But there is that shift from the liver qi being stagnant to needing to much, much more nurture the spleen, which will mean that the quality of the energy we take in is really important, which in its turn will affect everything in the body. The spleen is so vital in Chinese medicine. If that's not functioning, then we're not going to function because we get 70% of our postnatal chi from our food.
So, and I partially know the answer to this, but I would love for you to explain this to us. So because we live in a society that, it's easier if something is not working well, we cut it out. We have surgery. So what happens when people have a splenectomy or remove the spleen?
Energetically, it should still be there, but you are removing a vital organ. I mean, and I don't think Chinese medicine has that for because they weren't there when people had spleens removed on the whole. I mean, every organ it can still be energetically there, but I would think that it would affect because it has this vital role. Because you've got the spleen and the stomach. The stomach does the job of moving food, rotting it, starting that rotting process, so it processes out. But the spleen, if you were to lose that, you would lose some of that ability to really extract as much vital energy from your food. You would be
Yeah.
weakened by it. You would be weakened by it. Even if there was an energetic imprint, it wouldn't be the same as having a functioning organ present.
So when you're talking spleen and that it's shifted, the importance is shifted from the liver to the spleen, you're
Yes.
speaking mostly energetically.
Energetically, yes. In the body, the energetics move away from a big focus on chi and the stagnation of chi in menopause, which is giving rise to all the sort of resentment and anger and sleep issues and all of those things that we know are often part of perimenopause. And we see an energetic shift to the vital importance of nurturing the spleen more, which means the way we eat and how we eat needs to be adapted to ensure we're nurturing the spleen. And of course, the spleen is also about the clarity of the mind. It isn't just about energetics on food, but it's also something that's about our ability to be clear, to be able to manage and process other things that we consume, like all the information. So, at a
Got it.
time if that were to weaken, then we might be more muddled, less able to cope. So, really nurturing spleens matter. It's about how everything we consume, really.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, we kind of start earlier in the system. Earlier, well, that's not a good way to put it. We start from a different because chi prana is all the same, and that's what we're really looking to do. Is we're looking
Mhm.
to maintain the stability
Yeah,
and the vitality of both the chi and the prana, right?
yeah,
But we start at the thing that is easiest for us to deal with, right? And so even if I were to say, okay, so we're getting into a drier space, so do things that moisturize the system. If you've got
yeah,
joint issues, you're going to want to do some sort of medicated massage. oil on it, warm it up, do all those things. But um, I think that I think this is where I'm enjoying science catching up
Yeah.
to us, and the discussions around the microbiome,
Yes.
and the discussions, and in Ayurveda, if we're looking at it from that perspective, we're looking at rasa, which is that first thing that happens that we
Mm.
ingest, that
Yes.
either builds or breaks down the microbiome. But rasa is also about taste. And taste, yeah, I mean that's another word for it. Rasa is
Mm.
not just system or plasma. It is taste. It is emotion as
Yes.
well. So it's this it's multifaceted
Mm.
in the way we look at it. And so because we have these six tastes, each of these, and the reason we have tastes, and they're not just on the tongue, they're throughout the body,
Yes. Yes.
right? What a taste does is it tells the mind or the brain or the nervous
Mm.
system what's coming in to the
Mm.
system, whether it is healthy or unhealthy, right? Yes, and it also, and these tastes, because they're also connected to emotions, are also discussing something. So when we got on today, I knew that I was a little pissy today, you know. I knew, I mean, I could feel it. So what am I
Yeah.
doing is I'm drinking tea that's
Mm.
giving me a little bit of the sweet taste
Yes.
so that I can, be
Mm.
kinder rather than, out there. Um,
Yeah.
but what happens with these tastes is that they influence the microbiome. The microbiome, as you know, are throughout the body, and it also through the vagus nerves. The brain understands what to do,
Yes.
and so we're looking at this digestive system that is key to health.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond, before we even look at this, is something that we can do something about,
Mm.
and understanding the tastes and the elements that go along with those tastes and
Yes.
the emotions, that allows us um, to make better decisions that doesn't need a microscope or an ingredients list, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Right.
okay, I can have all six tastes. And the interesting thing about it is that as we age, we start losing our sense of taste.
We
And
do.
and that's partly because the rasa, the water element, has reduced itself, the juiciness within ourselves. And sometimes we can tolerate different flavors that we never could before. I mean, we can tolerate diversities of foods, but
Mm.
the taste itself diminishes, kind of like in COVID when lots of people, and it's a disease in
Mm.
Ayurveda, before we even deal with diseases of the aging. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting because the spleen is about sweetness, and what we often notice is that older people eat, they crave sweet stuff if their spleen is deficient. So you'll go for the thing that's deficient. And we know, I see that. I saw that in my mother, for example. And she had biscuits. And I'm like, where are biscuits everywhere, and the sort of thing she would never have done. They sort of start eating. They eat a lot of that sort of things. And that might be that the spleen has not been nurtured. We're not eating in the way that supports that system, and we end up craving too much sweet to compensate for a loss of sweetness, which isn't just physiological, but is also in our life that we don't have, that we may have had when we were younger, but we may not. But there is a craving for more sweetness, more sense of the sweet things, the sweet sort of feeling of life.
Just a little translation for the Americans out there. Bis-
A biscuit's a cookie. Yeah, a
Biscuits
biscuit.
are
I forget.
cookies.
Is that cookie? Yeah, she had a lot of
Biscuits
those.
generally
She had
aren't
a lot.
sweet.
they aren't sweet though. So for
In the
me,
United
yeah,
States, at least, yeah, they're more savory in
yeah.
general, or
I need a
cardboardy.
cookie.
Um,
But
they are
cookies are a big part of older
cookies
people. They often,
have additional sweet, but I want to say something about that from an Ayurvedic perspective.
yeah,
As far as biscuits are concerned, the
mm,
American style.
yeah,
Um, so biscuits are made from some sort of a grain,
yeah,
usually, whether it's corn or wheat or who knows what else.
yeah.
But grains are sweet in nature.
They are.
They are, and they're sweet in taste. So if you're not taking in um, sweet, sugar sweet, you're seeing, and you don't have you haven't been desensitized to the subtle tastes of sweet, then there you are. By the way, this sweet in my tea is actually has some grapes in it
Ah,
to have the sweet taste. Yeah,
that's nice. That's nice. Yeah,
yeah.
but you're absolutely right there, Chitra. Grains. I mean, the classic one is rice. Rice is a
Mm,
sweet grain. Oats can be sweet. They can be problematic for other reasons, which is the way they're grown. But a lot of these grains are sweet, and they often are. They also have a moisturizing element to them as well. Many of them. So yeah,
right. And if we're going back to the microbiome, first of all, they're a prebiotic. They do have fibers to them, unless you know, completely destroyed the nature of it. So
yeah,
they have fiber. So we're also going back in the West, where I'm hearing a lot of conversation about having fibers and prebiotic and do a fiber diet. And it's like, no, eat
no,
all of the foods, be diverse, because the
yeah,
microbiome has billions of different types of organisms that live
mm,
inside us, on us. It, it it's
yeah,
it's so diverse, and so what we need to do is we need to also get diverse. And unfortunately, many of us shop in grocery stores where we will see like only one type of, I don't know, yeah, one type of beet, you know,
yeah, yeah,
or the orange carrot is like a classic, or the yellow corn.
yeah,
These things come in so many different colors,
yeah,
so many different flavors, but our industrial complex has reduced the diversity. So
yeah,
when they reduce the diversity and we reduce our own diversity, that's when we start having issues with our microbiome. That's when we start have issues with our lack of diversity in thought and
yeah,
emotions, and that's when we age. So you can be have a post-menopausal aging mind and be 20 years old because of that lack of diversity.
yes, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's completely industrialized to the point that even there are varieties of orange carrots, but we have one seed that only comes from one season, and that is how it functions the whole time, rather than having the seeds that are gathered. They're all sorts of different types, and they come at different stages through the year. But no, we've taken all of that away. And of course, every carrot has to be the same size and the same shape. And my goodness, we've taken away everything
Yeah.
that is actually good. And we had diversity, and nature put it there for a reason.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So beyond the gut and the microbiome and the spleen, what else is it about post menopause that we'd like to talk about?
I think maybe it's the emotional. We've talked a bit about our emotions. We've talked
Hmm.
a bit about that. But what about our minds and our mindsets? What is there about that? we hear a lot about your purpose. What's your purpose? How does that?
Big topic.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Ayurveda draws from the Vedic traditions on this. So everyone's heard of the word karma.
Mm,
There's a word called dharma
yeah.
in Ayurveda, and in Ayurveda, dharma is can be translated into purpose, although a lot of times people have translated it into um, religion, I guess.
Mm,
So as far as what is Dharma, Dharma is your relationship within the world. It is
yes.
the relationship to yourself.
Mm,
It's your purpose, but that doesn't mean it's your job. It
no,
doesn't mean
no,
that it's extraordinary. It doesn't mean that you have to be famous. It doesn't
no,
mean that you have to be influential. But what it
no.
does mean is it means that you've established healthy relationships within
Mm-hmm.
self and
Yeah.
with others. And that in and of itself is your purpose in this life. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as because we are relational beings.
Yes.
Even if you don't have anyone else in your life and you love being an introvert, you're still establishing relationships with others. It doesn't have to be a single person. It can
No.
be about your attitude towards even if you're sitting there and reading a
Mm,
book or watching TV, you're creating relationships.
yes, you are.
You
Yeah.
know, you're still doing this back and forth thing, and certainly you've got this relationship with your microbiome, which is not your own thing. So it's a whole
Mm,
general species, or it could be
mm,
establishing relationships with your children, your pets. Um, so so that's the purpose,
yeah.
and if we go beyond that to postmenopause, because humans and what is it, killer whales are the only
Killer
ones
whale? No,
we are
this is
aware of.
killer whales. Well, killer whales. Yeah, it's killer whales.
The only ones that we're aware of that have postmenopause.
Yeah,
What are we doing? We're establishing relationships within the society.
we
We're
are.
estab- we're bringing the wisdom. We're telling the
Mm,
stories. We are bringing the medicines
yeah,
into the world, and we communicate it in whatever way that we can. And sometimes communication is not about speaking or writing or videoing.
no.
Communications happens in silence as well.
Mm, mm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, interesting. That's interesting. In
Brought
the
up the word
Chinese, yeah,
dharma,
Dharma, yeah. Well, if you go, if you practice any Buddhist practices, you'll hear about Dharma, and I think it's this, it's a giving thing. My understanding of it is something that is about giving, about service, however small that is. And
Yes.
in the Taoist tradition, you get to that what's known as the Ming. But the Ming isn't purpose again, like you said, about your job or your label or your title or any of those things. It's again a much more inner thing. It's often found in stillness. People often reach that point through more still meditative practices, the going of the inward. And it is also about the service in the community that you give, even if your community is really tiny, if it's just you and whoever you interact with in whatever way. So
This one.
she is this
She's
one.
been,
Hello.
she's been back and forth.
She wants to say something. What do you
Well,
want to say, little cat? Little cat.
yes, that,
But this is
and
what Ming is about. It's not the way we're still interpreting it in lots of ways. To find your purpose as if you have to do something, and it isn't about doing. Um, in the sort of full sort of tradition where qigong, etc., live, you've got the sort of lifestyle yang shen, which is your baseline of how you eat and sleep and all the rest. You've got the qigong, which is actually the first stage, but then you move to more heart-centered practices called the shengong, and the shengong evolved to more deeply spiritual practices known as neigong. And through that journey from Negong to eventually the Neidan, that's where your Ming emerges on that journey. It isn't to do with anything outward at all. It's incredibly inward looking. And so, in a lot of the work that I'm doing, I'm much more here in that, though I call it Qigong for Western people to understand. A lot of the work that we do in the women's Qigong, it's really much more at the Neigong end. It's much more inner alchemy. It's much more about moving energy through the extraordinary vessels and people actually accepting, loving, finding themselves, connecting into themselves than it is some of the more outward focuses of Qigong, which you might see that have more, and they're brilliant for other reasons. They're brilliant from a medical, physical reason. They're amazing for making you really strong without pumping iron at the gym. But they're very different as you move towards the Neigong space.
And the Vedic systems have a similar thing. So Dharma is just one of 4 parts of life,
Mm-hmm.
and the early ones, the early one is basically learning and growing and being asexual or non-sexual, in the very early stage of life. And some people, the words escape me as to how it's been interpreted, but it's always wrong. Uh, but it's really about learning how to be in life, the early stage. Um, then there's artha, which is enjoying the life and having the fruits of that dharma, of the purpose in life. And then later on, and this you can see this in many of the mythological, if you want to call them stories. It's moksha is the next one, where you're looking for liberation. And so the idea is you go into the forest to be alone, to meditate, so that you can find the deeper secrets of life, death, and all that there is, right? So that's a stage that, in a sense, it comes full circle. This is what women are wanting to do in postmenopause as they're getting into their 80s, 90s. Yes, they can be in the world, but they're not of the world at that time.
Yeah, we're much more inner. We are not. We've lost that need for the outer to be what defines us, and we are more spiritually, more inwardly defined. I think.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and I think that, and now I don't know this 100%, but I think that stage is also different from being an introvert,
Oh
you know,
yes.
or being um, spiritually inclined. I mean, yes, there
Yeah.
there are some older souls that come into the world that, this is what they do. That's all they do. But for 90%, 98% of the human population,
Yeah.
we're not. It's not that fullness of deeper, larger being with the universe.
No, no, I don't. I don't think most people will, but it's very small parts of that.
Mm.
I don't think that we're talking that people will become nuns and retire to a to a cave
Right.
on the hill. I don't think that's what people do because they can still be very much present in their community. But there is maybe when we're younger, we're very outwardly focused. It's a different thing. It is much more about me than it is about inward and us. There's a difference, and we are acting more as teachers and guides for the younger generation. If we live in a society that allows that, and I think that's the great sadness of our time, is the disconnection of the generation.
Yeah. And that's really the beautiful thing about being beyond menopause. Rather than it just gets better. Thank God it's over, right? There's that deepening. There's the spirit, the soul starts coming through.
And who
If
we
we
truly are, Chitra, that we've had to sometimes hide because
Yeah,
of the demands that the outer world places on us.
yeah. And I think I know I have to fight the demands every single day. Even with choices that I've made that I think are my own choices, but it's like, so do I really have to do that? Do I really what do I really have to do? What is it that I really want to do? What am I really called to do? Those are really good questions, rather than, when I was young, I had this dream that I wanted to be an actress, you know, whatever, or an artist, or, and so now I have to put in various disciplines so that I can learn that skill and practice that skill and show off that skill. That's not it. You can still be that actor, that artist, that writer, and not have to do it in this yang way, as you would put it. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to do it in that way. Maybe we're not looking for the same level of approval
Yeah.
all the time. And I think that's the difference. We do it because we want to do it, because we choose. And of course, not everybody's in a financial position, and we can make it, it seems sometimes very unattainable. But just being in your community, maybe just being a good neighbor might be the way that you show up at this stage of life. And then we've really entered into an elderhood. But that's not straight postmenopause. There's a growing into that.
Exactly. So I
Yes,
think
what a
our
topic.
time,
There's so much to say.
yeah, there's a lot to say. And there's physiological, emotional, mind, relationship, all the things are here, and they're affected, and there we go. It's another big topic because of all the things.
Exactly. And a lot of what we would have said before applies just as much about diet and exercise and rest. All of those things always apply,
And
even in this stage of life, and sometimes even more important.
especially in this stage of life, because I don't know about you, but my ideal way to die is in bed, asleep, or something to that effect, where I am not needing it. It's just let me go in a
Yep,
very peaceful way,
I agree. That's how
but
I'd like
without
to go.
suffering.
Yep, I agree. And I don't want, and I think, you know, you make a peace and you realize when it's time to go, it's time to go. I've lived my life, and when it is, that's it. That's how I feel about it. There's no fear to pass to the other side whatsoever.
Exactly. And up until that time, we live our Dharma. We live our truth. We
We do.
live in a way that is mentally satisfying.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
satisfying to the self, rather to the expectations.
exactly. Exactly. Well, there we are. What a conversation.
Yeah. I'll see you next week,
Well,
guys. Thank
see
you
you
for
all.
those of
Thank
you
you.
who are going to watch this.
Exactly. We hope you do.
All right.
See you
Bye.
next week.
See you
Bye.
next week.